was 5:30 that night when the windows were rattling, and I thought I better check on this fire. I really thought that the fire department would be knocking on doors and there'd be sirens and police and what an evacuation would look like in my head. And that mountain behind you was on fire.
In the summer of 2012, Colorado Springs experienced the worst wildfire in the history of their city. It burned for 2 weeks, consuming over 350 houses, and took 2 lives in its process. Much like the rest of Colorado, the wildfires are very unpredictable. The climate and our daily activities have a very large impact on the increasing number of wildfires in Colorado.
It was Thursday, so the fire happened Tuesday. Thursday, they grouped us all at UCCS, and they handed us out a piece of paper with all the addresses. So there were almost 350 homes, and it would either say destroyed, which is a really rough word, or they'd say, partially disabled. But so then, of course, the grief sets in, and then we came up on Sunday. We had to wear masks and gloves, and those roots were still burning. And just, seeing the debris that's left and all the trees being gone was pretty devastating. It still looks a bit like, Phoenix or a funeral home up here to me. It still feels very ghostly. There are very few homes, as you can see, that have been rebuilt. Everybody either was underinsured or they took the money and moved and ran, because the memories of being here, it's just not the same.
Over the past few decades, there has been a trend of an increasing number of wildfires per year in Colorado. In 1978, there were 362 wildfires that burned a total of 13,085 acres. And in 2009, there were 2,973 wildfires burning over 40,000 acres. The worst year we had with wildfires was in 2002, with 3,409 wildfires burning 244,252 acres. The average number of wildfires from 2000 to 2009 is 2,465.3 wildfires, with damage to, on average, 96,449.13 acres per year.
I remember being down at La Baguette. It started on Friday night, I think, or Saturday. So I lost the house on the 26th, so I'd have to backdate that to 25, 24, 23rd. I guess when we first saw just smoke rising out of the mountains. And we were having lunch, and I said, boy, that's not a good sign.
Our contribution to global warming, as well as climate change, has increased the number of wildfires. The increasing droughts, scorching temperature, and wind are all triggers for wildfires as well. We are already experiencing warmer, earlier springs and smaller snowpack, making the forest hotter and drier. This leads to a longer fire season by 2.5 months, in which wildfires are more likely. As you could probably assume, the desert is less affected by the change in temperature because there is less biomass in the desert.
Tuesday morning it was super calm. I let the cats out of the house, and I went to work on Tuesday morning, and a firefighter came in and he said the RF factor is really low. I said, what's an RF factor? And he said that's relative humidity, or RH factor. And so I said, I don't know how that applies to me. And he said, well, don't you live up there? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, that means that it's so super dry that things can combust just from the heat and the particulates in the air. And I said, oh, that doesn't sound good. And he said, well, is your house all mitigated? And I said, yeah, I don't have any trees close to the house. And I said, I have a little bit of firewood by the house for the fireplace. And he said, you probably want to go home at lunch and move that. Because it had been so dry, 7 years of drought, the winds, they said, were really unusual. The cumulus of the clouds at the time had a lot of particulates in it, all this, and it can be dust or it can be a dried leaf, but when there's so much heat that all it takes is a little tiny spark, and then with that much oxygen moving that fast, the winds. And I think that when they came through that Queens Canyon there, that they really picked up some velocity, the wind did, when it came up over this back hill here. And then it just came down the ravine. All of these ravines that everybody has in between their houses were just loaded with these 30-foot dry pine trees. So I think it was just and then most of our houses here, as you can see, are stucco, which doesn't burn. They're concrete roofs, and everybody mitigated pine needles. So we really didn't think our homes would burn aluminum doors, but the glass broke for most everybody. So it was so hot that the glass just basically melted.
Wildfires cause pollution, which is a positive feedback for global warming mechanisms. It is predicted that wildfires can increase from 19 to 101% in the next century among places in the U.S. Even on a small scale, these wildfires will create pollution that adds to global warming. For every acre burned, 4.81 metric tons of carbon is released into the atmosphere, with 80 to 90% of that being CO2.
Sunday, we had I guess they had a voluntary evacuation for our neighborhood. They did a kind of a voluntary Monday as well, where you couldn't come up from the north, you couldn't come up from the south, and you couldn't come up from the east, but you could come in these back roads here to the west, and the fire was in the west, which was kind of strange that they had never, evacuated us. And I think that's why 2 people died.
At the current rate of climate change with increasing wildfires, wildfires may cost $10 to $62.5 billion per year by 2050. In 2013, they cost $1.7 billion alone, and that included only the cost of fighting the fire. In the past 5 years, wildfires have burned, on average, 6.3 billion acres per year. Smoke jumpers, air tankers, and a hotshot crew can effectively stop a fire from spreading about 95% of the time. If firefighting fails, the National Interagency Coordination Center takes charge. They are on call 24 hours a day, monitoring fires around the country. Like other natural disasters, wildfires are classified. Type 1 wildfires are the most urgent and dangerous. As we see a change in climate leading to increased wildfires, some adaptations have been proposed to take necessary precautions. These changes include creating a wildfire risk map and making the risks known before property sale. They also include charging those living in at-risk areas an urban interface fee based on risk in order to defer some of the public property cost of damage and protection. Finally, they will create fire-resistant building codes that would change the materials used in construction of houses in wildfire-dangerous areas.
Because there's nothing to hold it now, so there's no roots. When these trees all burned, we weren't allowed on the property. Even though the fire had been out for 5 days, we weren't allowed on the property because the roots were still burning. So if you think about a tree root, if the tree looks like this on the top of the earth, it looks the same underneath. And if there's nothing underneath that used to grow around all these rocks and pebbles, and you can see this dirt's, crushed granite basically, so there's nothing to hold the water. So as soon as the water starts flowing, it just creates these sinkholes and things just collapse. So it's very unfortunate. And that's why most people have tried to create embankments with their dead wood or rocks.
While wildfires are unpredictable, they are expected to increase by 50 to 100% in western areas of the United States, including Colorado, by 2050. This not only adds to global warming, but wildfires can be very damaging in terms of both economic and ecological expenses.
People want to help out as much as they can as individuals, but I think they also had no clue what to do. Yeah, and they were grateful that it didn't happen to them. Because nobody thinks this is going to happen to them. It's like cancer. It's not going to. That poor lady, it's not going to happen to me. But it does. Change your life for sure. And there's also that piece, that's a bit freeing. Just like starting all over again.
Look up, child, world is born. Shoes untied and your soul's warm. Windows are